Hi friends, welcome back to my channel Modern Quantity Surveyor, Key Skills to Have. Today let's look into the key principles of stakeholder management, and this is part of the mandatory competency for client care. There are 10 key principles, and each principle identified has an overlapping relationship with the others and can have a positive impact on the engagement of stakeholders. So the 10 key principles are: first, communicate, consult early and often, remember they are only human, plan it, relationships are key, simple but not easy, just part of managing risk, compromise, understand what success is, take responsibility. So the first principle for the stakeholder engagement is communicate. As everyone knows, good communication requires relentless and time-consuming effort to ensure the intended message is understood and the desired response achieved. Bad communication is pointed as the most common reason for project failures. Ineffective or insufficient communication includes unclear objectives, misunderstanding the brief, poorly coordinated teamwork, and ineffective risk management. Now, in parts of Middle East, especially where I work, the people value the ability to express themselves skillfully with many words using repetition and metaphor. A client success story about stakeholder communication. The most commonly cited reason for the project failure was that we had not really asked the client what they wanted. Technical challenges were encountered and they were easily resolved with the clients when there was an open and structured communication approach, that is through review meetings. So stakeholder consultation and development of stakeholder analysis should be an ongoing activity. The second principle is consult early and often. Engaging with stakeholders early, asking the right questions, listening to their concerns, responding to them, and being prepared to adjust proposals to address valid concerns is critical to success. Ongoing consultation in order to keep a check on stakeholders' feeling and gain support. Stakeholders, even though they stand to gain from the change, will often oppose a project simply because they were not consulted. So a good thing is to ask people questions for their advice. Do not hesitate. One client success story. Major public infrastructure projects are usually controversial and involve many stakeholders. And if there is one thing that I have learned over 30 years helping clients with the definition and early stage development of projects, it is the importance of winning hearts and minds by meaningful early engagement and ongoing consultation with stakeholders throughout the project lifecycle. Principle 3. Remember they are only human, and humans do not always behave in a rational, reasonable, consistent or predictable way. Human feelings, whether of support, indifference, opposition, will usually determine the success or failure of the initiative. Understand the underlying intention and behaviors of different people and how they wish to be engaged with. So there was a refurbishment of a local authority Victorian baths in London, and due to low budget there was a decline of the facility. Now the original shortfall in budget was overcome through collaboration with the local campaign group at one of the regular forums which were held. As a result, there was a very positive public perception with low complaints from the stakeholders, and this project demonstrated that from the local baker to the local MP, each person's agenda can be valid and worthy of incorporation. Fourth principle is stakeholder engagement plan or Plan 8. Stakeholder engagement needs to be done with some flexibility because of the unpredictable nature of the people. Careful planning and investment in stakeholder engagement has significant payoff. So never underestimate the importance of proactive and consistent stakeholder engagement. Now, this is a case study of London congestion charge project management. They face many risks from rioters and naysayers, but risks were managed by Institute stakeholder management from day one. There was a strong leadership and proactive plan for managing the significant risks, such as financial, political, and so on. So, the ultimate success of the project was firmly rooted in the fact that there was a very detailed and thorough stakeholder engagement plan over the full life cycle of the project. Principle 5, relationships are key. Good working relationships help to gain stakeholder support besides winning bids, and contracts will be awarded to bidders that have stronger relationship as opposed to stronger proposals. So seek out networking opportunities and set aside time specifically to develop the skill. A civil engineer 28 years old who was working for an engineering consultancy says that while my professional qualifications are in the technical discipline, my career progression will be much more dependent on my ability to develop right relationships and allies, and the person in my network with the most obvious ability to further my career is my current boss. 6 principles, simple but not easy. Being effective at stakeholder engagement relies on being empathetic and being a good listener. Engagement means to use multiple forms of interaction and a lot of listening. Now, a lead surveyor in a small school extension project says, I learned a valuable lesson of how simple activities can make us big difference. Even though the design team was small, they engaged the client and key stakeholders such as parents and staff, and that's why they obtained the full support of the stakeholders, and the approval process was much easier than any other project. Principle 7, just part of managing risk. Now, stakeholders could be treated as a category of project risk, and project risks are associated with stakeholder behaviors and attitudes such as unhappy subcontractors, unions, local communities. Powerful stakeholders who are upset, they may cause delays and extra cost. So that's why managers need to draw a stakeholder grid on everything the stakeholders might do, and especially monitor high-risk stakeholders. This is a case study of a research university's growing postgraduate population. Because of this project, there were several risks such as quality, budget, program, site-based, and so on. Also, demolition of 2 structures were needed, which could pose risk of ground and nuclear contamination. But regular engagement with the stakeholders through risk workshops to determine the risk, reduce its likelihood, and prioritize mitigations were held. Thus, stakeholders became part of the decision-making process, which led to a successful risk strategy. Principle 8, compromise. When stakeholders have diverging priorities, it's so difficult to reconcile. Then use the best compromise. It is identify and assess the stakeholders' relative importance. Differing interests of stakeholders needs to be weighed accordingly, with the best compromise solution being at the center of gravity. Now, this is a case study of redevelopment of a ruin, that is nursing home, which was ruined into a hostel for homeless people. Again, local residents, they opposed to this project. That's why stakeholder meetings were held, and there was also a risk of the refusal of planning permission. But the stakeholder meetings were a key to unlocking informed dialogue, which led to amendments to the scheme. So thus there was a compromise. The hostel residents could run a cafe and planning permission was granted. And those who opposed, they were also offered the opportunity to be involved in ongoing stakeholder liaison. Principle 9, understand what success is. Now, most important way to measure project success is an aggregate of the value created for all stakeholders. That is how satisfied the stakeholders are, whether a group or individual. And 3 attributes of stakeholder success in a project are what is delivered, how it is managed, and relationships with the people who delivered it. A case study about a new office building which was delivered on time and budget but was not seen as a success from the customer's perspective is because the relationships were fraught throughout the project. Therefore, it is recommended that project managers should identify and distinguish their success, the stakeholders' success criteria, and the most obvious method of doing this is to ask them directly. The last principle, take responsibility. There are specific stakeholder engagement roles and job titles like head of stakeholder engagement on large projects. But many projects do not have such roles, and the senior members of the team are responsible for this engagement. That's why using RASI matrix helps to clarify who should be doing what in relation to stakeholder engagement and the associated communication activities. Now, an employee in a mining company says, "This is not in my job title, that is stakeholder engagement." He works for a large mining company and he says the stakeholder engagement is increasingly seen as the responsibility of everyone working on our projects. And the external stakeholders include contracts in central government, local government, unions, NGOs, and the challenge is giving consistent information about each project. Taking responsibility involved engaging and communicating with the parties that have a stake in our projects, even if this is not necessarily referred to in the job title. So finally, the main principles which we have seen can be summarized into three main topics. Remember, what you say is not the same as what they hear. Ask people questions for their advice. Do not hesitate. Seek clarifications. Building relationships makes for a more pleasant working experience. Remember, stakeholders are only human. So learn at least one competency a week. Thank you and enjoy. Please subscribe to my channel.